never stay. With you my heart is led each day. In your arms I'm safe, I'm free, resting in your love eternally.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you've joined us today for what I believe will truly be an eye-opening and heart-expanding experience. On Sundays, we take a break from our usual business presentations and turn our focus inward. Now, these gatherings are a chance to feed not just the mind, but the spirit, and to explore topics that help us become better people in every area of our lives. Today's topic is one that touches every one of us: making a prayer that works. Now, this isn't about repeating words or following a script. It's about stepping into a way of being that taps into a deeper spiritual power. It's about praying in a way that creates a real visible result, not just in the heavens, but in our daily lives. Now, many of us grew up being taught that prayer is about asking, pleading, or hoping. But what if there's a forgotten way to pray, a way that was once known by ancient mystics and spiritual masters, but was hidden or erased from our modern traditions? Today, we're going to explore that very idea through the work of Gregg Braden, a spiritual pioneer who has spent years uncovering the wisdom of ancient texts and bringing them with modern science. The video we'll be watching is called The Fifth Mode of Prayer, the prayer they tried to erase. It reveals a form of prayer that doesn't ask for something to happen. It feels the outcome as already done. Now, this isn't about religion or dogma. This is about activating the spiritual laws through alignment that govern the power of manifestation. So get comfortable, open your heart, and allow yourself to ask, is there a way to pray that will activate the promise in Scripture that says, whatsoever you ask in prayer believing, you shall receive? So let's go ahead and dive in.
Is there a fifth mode or a lost mode of prayer that allows us to move beyond needing intervention, beyond asking for help, a mode of prayer that allows us to be part of the solution? So in other words, is there a way of communicating with the divine matrix, with this Higgs field, that considers us as part of, rather than separate from, the field that we are experiencing from within? Well, the answer is the reason that I'm sharing this episode. It's a resounding yes. So what I'd like to do is share an example. This is a story, a true story that happened to me when I left the corporations in the early 1990s, and I moved to a piece of land in the high desert of northern New Mexico. And those of you that live in that part of the world, you may remember the 1990s was one of the worst droughts in recorded history. The elders of the native peoples, they said in the memory of their ancestors, they'd never seen a drought that had lasted as long as what we were experiencing. It was going on 5+ years. It was terrible. Cattle were dying, crops were dying, people were selling their farms because they could no longer support themselves on the land. And it was during this time that a native friend of mine called me one morning. And to honor his privacy, I'm going to call him David, even though David is not really his name. But David called me one morning and he asked me, he said, "Greg, would you like to meet me and accompany me to a place that is so old, no one even knows who built this place. It was built by the hands of our ancestors. It is a wheel. It is a circle of stone where we offer our prayers, because in this place, the skin between the worlds is very thin." I love that terminology. So he said, "Would you like to join me to offer a prayer of rain?" And I didn't have to think twice. I said, "You bet." And I met David and we hiked into this place. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. As an Anglo, as a Westerner, I expected to see some chanting, some kind of ceremony, maybe some dancing. And what I saw was David. He sat on the ground. He took off his old work boots. He unlaced them and put them outside the circle. He stepped into the circle with his his naked feet on the ground. He closed his eyes. He honored all of his ancestors. He honored the directions, all 6 of them. And then he closed his eyes with his hands in a prayer mudra over his heart, just for a few seconds. This was outside of the town of Taos, New Mexico. It's the nearest city of any size. And he looked at me. He opened his eyes and he looked and he said, I'm hungry. You want to get a bite to eat? And he was inside the circle. And I said, well, yes. I said, but I thought you were going to pray for rain. And he looked at me, and what he said has stayed with me so powerfully for so long, and it's helped so many people when they think about how this prayer works. He looked at me and said, no. He said, if I prayed for rain, rain could never happen. He said, because the moment I pray for rain, I have just told the universe that rain does not exist here. The moment I pray for it to happen, I'm acknowledging that it's not here now. And I said, well, if you didn't pray for rain just now, I said, when you close your eyes, what did you just do? And he said, when I closed my eyes, he said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like when it rains in my Pueblo village. He said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like to stand with my naked feet in the mud, and the mud is there because there's been so much rain. He said, I smelled the smells of what the rain smells like when it rolls off the earthen walls from our Pueblo, and I felt what it would feel like to walk through the corn that's this high against my naked chest, and it's this high because there's been so much rain to grow the corn, and then I give thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened. All right, can you see now, through everything that we have explored, everything we've discovered in this series, can you see what David has just done? He's brought together so many of the concepts. He's acknowledging that there's a field out there, number one, that he's communicating with that field. He's acknowledging that the feeling is the language that the field recognizes. It's not so much about the words. The words can be spoken. However, if the words are spoken, the goal is to create the feeling, all right? And he's acknowledging that he has the potential as a man, a human, in the presence of this field, to reach inside of the field into the realm of all things that are possible and isolate the possibility of his choice and collapse that potential into something real in our world. And he's doing it through a very sophisticated internal technology that we call the lost mode of prayer. It is a feeling-based prayer. The key, feeling as if the prayer is already answered, coming from the outcome. There is a huge difference between working toward the outcome a little at a time and beginning with the outcome. And you've probably seen this huge difference in your life as a child. I know that I did. For example, I was told when I was young, if I scrape my knee on the sidewalk, that the healing is going to happen slowly, gradually, over a period of time. And you know what? Sure enough, that's exactly the way it happened. I would look and expect, my mom told me, she said, every day it's going to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And I'd look, and she was right. It was getting a little better, a little better, and a little better. Is it possible that when we look at our bodies with that kind of expectation, that the healing actually reflects, it mirrors our expectation? And if that is true, what would happen if we begin with the outcome? I want to tell you, I've done this in my life, and it has worked. And that's why I can sit here and look at you right now, and I can tell you, I know that this modality of prayer works. And when we talk about prayer, we're talking about this as a code interacting with creation. This has nothing to do with any religion whatsoever. And I want to be really clear about that. Although religions have wrapped the rules and the dogma around these deeply spiritual principles in the past, and actually led to people in some respects feeling further from their power. It has disempowered the people, the rules and the dogma. So we're cutting right through the rules and the dogma. We're going to the essence of our most ancient and cherished spiritual technology. It's about the relationship between you and me, the field, the earth, the heavens, the cosmos, and our bodies. So I've had the opportunity to begin my healing from the place where we are conditioned to think that it leads, to feel the feeling as if the healing has already happened. In other programs, I've talked about this. I went through a physical in the year 2000. There was a tumor inside my bladder that doctors wanted to operate on physically. I acknowledged that. I applied everything that I had learned in my life, and I really applied it. I didn't just kind of apply it. I lived the deepest truths, the existence of everything that I'm saying to you in this program, and it takes work. It takes work to do that. And I did that work, and when I went back, fully prepared for surgery if it was needed, what the doctors found was there's no need for the surgery. But I've done this with cuts and scrapes as well. Our bodies will respond. We're part of the field. We're emerging from this field, and we communicate with the field in a language that recognizes emotion, feeling, just like David did with the rain. Then the field responds. So let me tell you what happened with the rain. David and I went into Taos, New Mexico. We had lunch about an hour south of where this prayer was offered. By the time I got back onto my land, something began to happen that we hadn't seen in a long time. Big black clouds came in over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It started to rain, and it rained. And it rained and rained and rained. It rained all that night. It rained the next morning. It rained the next afternoon. It rained and rained. It rained so much the ground was so dry it couldn't absorb the rain, and everything began to flood. Fields were flooded. Cattle were stranded. Roads were washed out. And I called my friend on the phone. I'm just going to share this with you. I called my friend on the phone and I said, David, man, this is a mess. I said, what is happening? And he was quiet just for a moment. And he said, Greg, that's the part of the prayer our ancestors could never figure out. He said they could tell it to rain, but they couldn't tell it how much to rain. So I cannot prove to you scientifically that David's prayer had anything to do with the rain that came in that afternoon. I cannot prove that to you as a scientist. As a scientist, what I have to say is there's a high correlation between the rain that appeared that hadn't been seen in a long time and what David had just done hours earlier. And the weatherman would agree. I watched the weatherman that evening, and on the weather maps, what they showed was a low pressure front that came across Utah, Wyoming, and it came into Colorado and then down into northern New Mexico, and it made a little loop and went right back up. And that low pressure system is what brought the rain to that place. So when we talk about these things, some of these are anecdotal stories, but they're illustrating from an indigenous perspective a very powerful concept. Look at what David did. He incorporated all of his senses. He didn't ask for something to happen. He felt it had already happened. He smelled what it smells like when it happens. He heard the sounds of the rain. I didn't even tell you about that part, but he heard the sounds of the rain. And he felt as if that rain is already there. I'm going to invite you to think about this as we go into this modality of prayer that I'm going to share with you. So the principles that I'm sharing in this mode are very simple. They're also very ancient. And everything I'm saying to you, we see the instructions for this kind of prayer, for this code that allows us to speak directly to the matrix. We see these principles recorded in some of our most ancient, cherished spiritual traditions. And I'm talking about lost biblical books that I described earlier in this program. These are the books that were discovered in the mid-20th century as the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest records of the Old Testament. The Nag Hammadi Library are the oldest records of the New Testament, both of them found in the mid-20th century, the 1940s. And in that Nag Hammadi Library, the 43 plus books that were completely removed from the biblical canon in the 4th century by the Emperor Constantine were intact in the Nag Hammadi Library, including the Gospel of Thomas that we've spoken about earlier. Thomas the scribe, that followed the master, Jesus, the teacher, not a religious man from this perspective, but he followed the teacher, and he recorded the words, the exact words of the teacher. And this is important because there is a place in the Gospel of Thomas where his students asked the teacher how to communicate with the field. They didn't use those terms. They asked how to communicate with God. And it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we find the instructions for the 5th mode, the lost mode of prayer. Now, I mentioned earlier that you've heard the term when something is lost in translation. And it is this translation that I'm going to share with you from this biblical book after its discovery that is a beautiful example of just how much a difference, one difference, an error in translation can make. So it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we actually find the instructions for this 5th or this lost mode of prayer, as I mentioned. So let me first read to you the translation in the authorized version of the King James Bible as we see it today. If you'd like to see this for yourself, it's in King James Version of the book of John 16 through 23 is where you would find this. I know you've heard this before. How many of you have heard, ask and ye shall receive? That's where this comes from. But let me read you the translation. The translation goes like this. Whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Ask and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full. Okay, and that's the end of the translation. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I would ask and ask and ask, and not much would happen. And I became very frustrated. Many people do. And we feel powerless. We feel that our prayers really aren't making any difference because we're not seeing any way to reinforce that our prayers have actually done something. They've made a difference. But I want to go back into the original Aramaic translation, and Greek and Aramaic both, but this is going to be from the original Aramaic. In the Gospel of Thomas, you see Greek and Aramaic, is why I'm clarifying this. And I want to read you, and it's very close, but there's a powerful and subtle difference that was left out in the translation, and it may very well be because the translators did not understand what you and I are exploring right now. And because they didn't understand it, they simply streamlined the languaging. So, in the translated version, and if you'd like to see this for yourself, it comes from Neil Douglas Clotes, is the name of the translator. There's a little book called Prayers of the Cosmos. It is a beautiful, beautiful book where he retranslates so many of the very powerful prayers, and this is one of them. Now listen to the difference. In the original text, it begins a very similar way. Quote, all things that you ask straightly, directly, from inside my name, you'll be given. Okay, now here comes the translation that was in error. This is the original. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. That is a single, very powerful statement. I'm going to break this down. Ask without hidden motive. That is inviting you to ask without attachment to the outcome. It's actually a very Buddhist concept. Ask without attachment to the rightness, the wrongness, the goodness, the badness, or the joy or the disappointment as to whether or not your prayer is answered, without attachment to the outcome. Okay? Be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire. The only way to be is if those things are already present. Your prayer is already answered. You're coming from the place that the prayer has already been answered. So the key to what we're saying here, feel the feeling. Feel as if the prayer is already answered with as many senses as you can. Smell, touch, taste, hearing. Feel as if your body is already healed. Feel as if your perfect relationship is already present. Feel as if your abundance is already present. Invoke all of those senses. The bottom line of everything I'm saying to you is through the fifth mode of prayer, our feeling-based prayer, we are given the ability to communicate directly with the possibilities that exist in the universal field, in this divine matrix, and to do so in a language that the matrix recognizes. Our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have preserved the knowledge and the technique to interact with the divine matrix and for us to rewrite our personal as well as the global reality code. Well, in the next episode, we'll discover why our relationship with this matrix literally holds the key to the crises that are destroying our families and our communities, polarizing our societies and our nations today. So I want to thank you for joining me for this very special presentation, and be sure to tune in for our next all-new episode of The Divine Matrix, Bridging Time, Space, Miracles, and Belief.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I've shared some of my personal stories of praying in this manner. Starting in 2008, I lived in Mexico for 6 years. During that time, my 8-year-old son fell from a high cement wall. His mother took him to the doctor and found that his tailbone was broken. The doctor suggested taking him to a hospital an hour and a half away. And I reminded my wife, who had broken her tailbone when she was younger, that doctors can do nothing for a broken tailbone. And I asked my son if he would rather trust in God or trust in the doctors to heal his tailbone. And without hesitation, he said he would rather trust in God. So I began to walk him through 4 simple keys of faith. Number 1 being gratitude. And so I told him, gratitude or problems or an opportunity to exercise faith. Without problems, probably none of us would ever exercise faith. And the Bible says without faith, we can't please God. So I look at problems as an opportunity to exercise faith. And that's what I told him. And so he took a minute and he thanked God that he had broken his tailbone. The next thing I told him to do was to visualize his tailbone coming back together and being healed completely. And he took a minute and he did that. And I said, the next thing you need to do is surround yourself with the feeling of your tailbone already being healed and the pain being totally gone. And so he took a minute to do that. He looked off to the right. He's standing, I'm sitting in my office chair and he's standing facing me and he looks off to the right. And as his eyes get about halfway back toward me, I saw him visibly connect with a feeling. And in, I would say, less than a minute, he got this big smile on his face and he said, "Daddy, Daddy, the pain's all gone. It doesn't hurt anymore." And I said, "Okay, that means you've been healed." And I said, the next step is to, thank God that your tailbone's been healed, your pain is gone, etc. And he did. He thanked God that his tailbone had been healed, and he went out to play. About 2 hours later, I'm again sitting in my office, and the Spirit tells me to get up and go into the living room. And no sooner had I poked my head around the door than I saw his older brother, very strong, strapping kid. He hit him with the palms of his hands right in the small of his shoulders and knocked him soundly to the ground right on his tailbone, hard enough that it would hurt, if not break, your tailbone. And I'm just thinking, oh no, not again. The interesting thing is this boy, we called him Chapo, he acted like he didn't even feel it. There was no frown on his face. He didn't get angry, didn't say anything to his brother. He just got up, reached around, dusted off the seat of his pants, and went outside to play. And so to me, this was a testimony to me, and I'm sure that's why the Spirit told me to get up out of my chair and go witness this, is so I could actually see, with my own eyes, that yes, indeed, his tailbone had been completely healed. But I've had many, many experiences. Let me just share maybe a couple more. I was, after I came to the Philippines, I was going to fly to the United States, and my daughter was a stewardess with Delta Airlines. And so I would get a deep discount if I would pay for a standby ticket. And so that's what I did. And I went to the airport a couple hours early, went through this long line to get up to the ticket counter. They hand me a seat request and tell me to go stand in this roped off area where other standby people wanting to fly standby were standing. And once the line had completed, all the people had gone through the line, gotten their tickets, then one by one, they came and started turning people away. But actually before that, as soon as I got into the roped off area, this lady walked up from the outside of this area. She walked up directly to me and standing right in front of me and started talking to me as if we were old friends. And she said, I'm a stewardess with Delta Airlines, and I came here yesterday to get a flight out. And she said the planes were full and I had to lay over. She said, not only that, but there's 40 people wanting to fly today, 40 people on standby, but there's only 10 seats available. Well, that was a direct blow to me because I knew that I was either the very last one on the list or second to the bottom on the list. And so there was either 38 or 39 people ahead of me. So that was not very good odds. And she said, not only that, but the planes are full for the next 7 days. You might have to just cart your baggage out to the street, get a taxi, and find a hotel and do this again, for the next 7 days. But I said to myself, faith is not dependent upon seats available. Whatsoever I ask in faith, believing, I shall receive. And so I began going through these steps, and I thanked God for this opportunity to exercise faith. And then I began imagining, what it would be like, to have a seat on this airplane. And I imagined myself walking down down the corridor to the plane and walking onto the plane. And then I imagined the feeling, sitting in the seat, imagine the feeling of starting to taxi down the runway. And then when the pilot pulls back on the throttle and you get thrust back into your seat. And then there's a distinct feeling when the tires leave the ground, when they first leave the ground. I don't know if it's a feeling of weightlessness, but it's a distinct feeling. And I could feel that I, flown enough that these were very familiar feelings to me. And so I'm going through this. And then I asked for a seat on the airplane that day. Of course, I'm standing here for quite a period of time. I would say at least a half an hour or more. And the temptation is, you're not going to catch a flight today. You might as well just get your bags and go. But I fought those feelings. Now, here's the interesting thing about faith. Faith never fails. We may fail faith. We may give up too soon. We may get to the precipice and think we're going to fall off the edge, or we come to odds like this. What are the odds of me being able to fly that day with 38 or 39 people in front of me and only 10 seats available? It's in the millions or billions, maybe even the trillions odds that I'm not going to fly that day. But I said to myself, no, I'm not going to listen to those little voices that are trying to dissuade me. I'm going to fly today. And so I just kept going through these 4 steps, imagining, being grateful, imagining, that I'm getting on the plane, the feeling that I would have if I were to fly that day. And when I first asked myself, I said, how would I feel if I were to get a seat on this plane today? And it was like this, almost like taking a deep breath and, this relaxation and just a great feeling came over me. So after all of the paying customers had gone through, then one by one, they came in, they took the 10 people that were going to fly that day, and one by one, they started turning the rest of us away. And again, this temptation, don't even stay, you might as well just leave. But no, I fought that feeling and I stayed. There was one other person there at the time that this attendant walked up with a seat request. She said, Mr. Austin. I raised my hand. She said, I've got a seat request here. If you're willing to go down through the long line of security, there might be a slim chance you'll get a flight today. She says, likely not, but there is a chance you might. I said, thank you very much. I took the seat request and I headed for security. Now, the line was long. I would have missed my flight, but somebody came up through the line with a poster holding with my flight number on it. And I raised my hand. They ushered me down to the front. As I got to the plane, they were just closing the door, but they took my seat request. I got on the plane and I flew that day. So again, this is just a testimony that this kind of prayer works. Okay. Whatsoever you ask in faith believing, you shall receive. That's the promise. And faith is not dependent upon seats available. In fact, I've used this many times when flying standby. Another time was at Christmas time. and I had flown in from the Philippines, and the plane that I was supposed to catch a flight from there to Phoenix. I have a daughter that lives in Phoenix. Uh, was 13 overbooked, and my daughter was the stewardess. She called me on the phone. She says, "Dad, this plane is 13 overbooked. Nobody misses their flights at Christmas time. There's no way you're going to fly." So she said she booked me on another flight to another location, and then from there I might be able to catch a flight to Phoenix. So I'm leaving. I'm heading toward the gate, but what I made a mistake and I got to the plane that had the 13 overbooked. But by the time I got there, I realized I'd be too late to get to the other plane. So I just sat down, started exercising faith, and I flew that day directly to Phoenix. I didn't have to catch a layover, from another place. And, she said, "Dad, I don't know how you do it." She says, "I'm a stewardess and I've been laid over a number of times." She says, "You've never been laid over once." And that was true. I never been laid over once. Another time I was coming from Mexico and to Phoenix, and I needed to catch a flight to Salt Lake City that night. I had a meeting the next morning, and I wouldn't be able to get there in time if I was to lay over in Phoenix. So I had to catch the flight that night. And if everything had worked perfectly, I would have been able to get to the airport on time. And I even talked to so we were in a 14 passenger van coming from Mexico with other passengers. And I asked the driver if he could drop me off at the airport because we go by the airport on the way to Phoenix, where the bus depot was. And he agreed to do that, but there was a cloud burst, and so we had to go to a different port of entry. And that cost us time. And then there were some other delays, and he had to drop some people off and whatnot. By the time we got there, we were very late. But the interesting thing, as we got into the United States, so I could talk on a cell phone to my daughter, she's checking with the airport. She says, "Dad, the plane is in the air. It's on time. But at this time, I would have been able to make it." And anyway, with the delays and whatnot, here I'm about 15 minutes late. And so after a little while, she calls me up. She says, "Dad, the plane has been delayed 15 minutes." Now, mind you, this plane is in the air. It's in the air. It's scheduled to be on time. And now all of a sudden it's 15 minutes late. And as each of our delays kept pushing us back, so we're a half hour late. And she would call me, "Dad, the plane has been delayed. Now it's a half hour late." And it just, this kept going on. But time we got to the airport, the driver could no longer drop me off. So I had to go to the bus depot, and I called my daughter and I says, "Can you come pick me up?" And she said, "Okay." And she put the address in her GPS, and she somehow missed it. I saw her drive by, and by the time she figured out where she was about another 5 minutes late. And then on the way to the airport, they were under construction, and so we missed the detour, and that put us another 5 minutes late. By the time we got to the drop off, it was about an hour late. And I didn't have any updates for sure, but I'm determined to fly, and I'm exercising my faith. And I said, "I'm going to catch this airplane." So I dropped my bags at the outside check-in. I didn't even want to take the time to take them in. I quickly went into the desk, got a seat request, and I went up to the gate, and the gate was empty. There was not a single person there. Nobody there waiting to fly to Salt Lake that night. So I'm thinking, I missed the plane. But there was somebody at the counter, and I walked up and I said, I asked them uh, regarding the plane. She said, "Oh, it just arrived. They're getting ready to unboard." And so I went and took a seat. But what she told me is the plane had scheduled, because there were no passengers flying to Salt Lake. The plane had scheduled to lay over in Phoenix that night. They had already scheduled that, but because I showed up, they flew me to Salt Lake that night. I was the only passenger on that plane. So, how does faith hold back a plane, cause a plane that's in the air on time to be delayed an hour? I don't know how. All I know is whatsoever you ask in faith, believing, you shall receive. Okay, so these are just a few stories, my own personal stories, which I've, shared. I've got other stories too, but, these are some of the, what I would call maybe the more profound stories, things that go way beyond the realm of possibilities. Anyway, we've got a hand up. Dr. K, would you like to unmute?
Hello, good evening.
Hello, Dr. K.
Yes, a great, great leader. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely in debt for this amazing leader, John Austin. I've known him 40 years. Back in those days, that he's the only one who really was integrity and honesty and gave me money enough like you won't believe it. 15,000 average a week. Incredible in his first company. And when he came to me a few months ago about this company, he said, Dr. K, I have something new. I said, John, you know me better. Just put me in. I don't need to know. Show me the money. Money talks and honey walks. And sure enough, he gave me position and I saw the money. And I went to work. I am a walking and talking BDM non-stop train. I just brought in a big leader, Frederick. He's on the call this afternoon. A gentleman from Haiti lives in Orlando, incredible leader. And we are great to have him. Frederick, welcome to the team and welcome everyone new on this Zoom call. And guys, just don't get technical. Just go to work, bring the people, put them in, and let the system pay you and create a commission. John paid a lot of money for this amazing technology system that giving us incredible opportunity. I've been in the blockchain marketing opportunity for 35, 38 years, and I haven't seen anything like it. I started when I bought Bitcoin at 14 cents back in those days. Imagine 14 cents. And I learned a lot. I burned a lot of Bitcoins on the way. But you have to spend money to make money. You know the rule, guys. So there's nothing free in this world. And if we don't take risk, we won't make it because you learn from your mistakes. And that's why I made the big money by learning from the mistakes I made along the way. And I thank God for BDM and John Austin, because John Austin gave me an incredible future. Amazing. I bought an RV camper, a Mercedes, from the money I got from him. And I'm taking that camper around the country, just recruiting leaders. I have leaders in 142 countries. So I'm going to get those leaders in the United States. And we speak 27 different languages. So we have people from all over the world. And they're going to go and bring the rest of their friends and family. It is simple opportunity. And please, Dr. Keke's system, keep it simple, successful. Don't just complicate life. Life is too complicated. Just follow the wheel. Don't change the spokes. It's going to be bumpy. And John, I cannot thank you for what you have bring to the world and what you brought to us. I mean, an amazing opportunity. We will never see anything like it. So, John, thank you. I take my hat off to you, and I cannot thank you enough, my good friend. Take care, guys, and good
Uh,
night.
Thank you,
Good
Dr.
night.
K.
You're welcome.
Anybody else like to share a comment or ask a question? Victor, go ahead. Yeah, you're unmuted, Victor. Did you want to share something? Okay. Anybody else?
Yep, it's Brian here from Australia.
Hey,
I'd like to just add a few things about the manifestation of prayer. I I have used this many, many times, and it's a very simple one. It's a very selfish one, but it is simple. And that is, I visualize parking spaces. If I have to go into a strange city or go to an appointment, um, I visualize a parking spot right beside where I need to go, or right outside where I need to go. And almost without fail, when I get to where I'm going, the parking spot is there because I see it, I feel it, and I also give thanks for it. And so manifestation works if it's done correctly. So that's my 2 cents.
absolutely. Yeah, it's faith does not fail. Like I said before, we can fail faith, but if we hold fast to our faith, it will always produce results. So, let's take the time, uh, and it takes practice. Faith is an exercise. Your faith gets stronger with exercise, just like your muscles. So the more you use it, the faster you're going to see results. So thank you for sharing. Let's go ahead and close. I want to thank everybody for being part of this powerful gathering today. We've explored a deeper way of praying, one that goes beyond words and taps into the energy of certainty, gratitude, and divine alignment. What Greg Braden called the fifth mode of prayer, the one they tried to erase, is not truly gone. It's alive within you. It's the prayer that sees with the eyes of faith, that feels with the heart of completion, and that speaks from a place of already knowing the answer is done. Now it's up to us to practice this way of praying, to stop begging and start aligning, to stop hoping and start feeling the truth of our desires already fulfilled. Because when we shift our inner world, the outer world can't help but respond. You are powerful, you are heard, and your prayer, when done from this place, works. So let's seal this moment with prayer together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the sacred wisdom revealed today. Thank you for awakening in us the remembrance of a deeper connection where prayer is not separation, but union, not pleading, but praise, not desperation, but declaration. We open our hearts in gratitude, not because something is coming, but because we know it is already done. You have placed in us the power to co-create with you, and now we choose to live from that place where love is our language, faith is our posture, and peace is our resting place. Let every desire that aligns with your will unfold with grace and power. Let our lives become living prayers, testimonies of unanswered petitions, miracles made visible. We walk forward now with joy, confidence, and a full assurance that what we have prayed is already so. In love, in trust, and in deep gratitude. Amen. Okay, with that, mark your calendars for Tuesday. We'll have our next meeting on Tuesday, and then on Thursday, again, I'm trying to work toward getting some webinars every day, but I haven't quite got there yet. But set your calendars for Tuesday. We'll see you at 8 p.m. God bless and have a wonderful evening.